Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the machine. The story behind the story continues. Welcome to the first broadcast of 2020, the year, hopefully, of perfect vision. Where we have no vision, the Bible tells us the people perish. Well, you can't really have 2020 vision. Perfect vision without a good pair of eyes. And, the problem as I see it, so many people in this world are just blinded. They have scales over their eyes. They really can't see what's in front of them because, you see, they've been blinded by the lies. This is a good song we should probably play, Mr. O. Blinded by the lies. Oh, but I digress. Oh, my goodness. We are so fortunate tonight, ladies and gentlemen, to have a special guest with us. Thank you, Dominique, for again coming through, as you always do, with some fantastic ideas for guests. And thank you for securing our guest tonight. Coming to us from the great state, the big state of Alaska, Judge Anna Von Reitz joins us tonight on the story behind the story. We're so fortunate to have her. But before we go and introduce her fully, let me just get back. And again, if you're listening to the show for the first time, let me tell you that this is Revolution Radio, where we originate the show, of course. We also tie into the Goldwater Network worldwide, and we tie into the studios and the incredible investigative reporters that are there in Manila, the thrillers down in Manila. We have with us on the show as well, Major Burdock. Welcome to the show, Major. And Philip, thank you again for coming on. I am confident we're going to have a lively show tonight. It's going to be lively and hopefully very educational. Okay, so folks.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Okay, I'm going to just do the introductions. I'm going to throw out some basic questions for our guest, and I let her just take center stage, shine the spotlight on Judge Anna, and give you a little bit of background of where she's coming from. And again, we did introduce her last week to some degree, gave out her websites for people to listen to. Again, as you hear this live, again, keep in mind it's 10 o'clock in the morning there in Manila, across the international date line. We have a lot of people tuned in. The land down under, the New Zealand, and the great Commonwealth of Australia. We're going to talk a little bit about Commonwealths today. We have a few Commonwealths here still in America, but things are happening that are people. If you don't understand, if you don't have 20/20 vision, if you don't really know what's going on, you're going to scratch your head and say, "What the heck just happened? What is this? What is that?" type of thing. And so, there's things happening about the Second Amendment, so-called. Is it valid? Is it real that we have the right to keep and bear arms, as many patriots believe we do? But we may have some spotlights on that tonight with the worldview of our guest. Judge Anna Von Reitz comes to us again, like I said, from the great state of Alaska. Let me just give you a little bit of background of her resume, to know somebody is to understand her a little better. We have, she wrote a very nice little intro that I think it's just best probably if we read it completely as written. And then I'll just let her come on and fill in the gap, so to speak. Here's what she wrote, and I love it. She says, I was born and raised in Wisconsin, go Green Bay, right? Educated in the Midwest at St. Olaf College and University of Wisconsin at Madison. Went off to explore the world. I landed in Alaska, loved it, and stayed. Started my life as a mathematician with a career in hard sciences, so not intending to become a justice and delve into history and law and government. All I can say about that is that God has a great sense of humor. Oh, absolutely, he does, Judge Anna. I mean, he looks at me, I'm sure, and laughs, and it's just, it has to have a great sense of humor to deal with me. But she goes on, my first hint that something was desperately wrong came by chance. I was listening to Nelson Rockefeller's confirmation hearings as Gerald Ford's vice president, Okay, this was, again, we just remind those listeners that may not be aware, again, about that history when Nixon resigned the White House after his debacle. His handpicked successor, Joe Ford, handpicked Nelson Rockefeller, an ultimate insider. And here we have Anna explaining, I heard him clearly say that he didn't pay any taxes at all. Well, Anna writes, right then and there I knew something was rotten in Washington, D.C., and the rest of the story is here to be written. Welcome to the story behind the story, Judge Anna von Reitz. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate every opportunity I get to talk to people about this, and especially such a broad spectrum of viewers and listeners all around the world. My greetings to my friends in Australia. I have quite a few friends from Australia and people that are very avid researchers who have done extremely wonderful work uncovering such things as the Justinian deception and the misuse and abuse of dog Latin by the Holy Roman Empire. And what we're actually looking at, so far as our research indicates, is a sort of a resurgence of the Holy Roman Empire and its continuing attempts to establish one world government under the auspices of the Holy See. So, but, going back into history, it's almost like unraveling a spider's web. You start out at the very outer edge of it, and as you're continuing to wind in and wind in and wind in to the heart of the issue, you keep going back further and further into history. And it takes quite a long time for you to do that if you're just starting out as I was 40 years ago, trying to get to the heart of the problem. And
yes. Let me just jump right in. I want to comment on what you said about the Holy Roman Empire, because my sweetheart and I, Sunday, she has as a Christmas gift to me, I said I'd kind of like to see what that Pompeii exhibit here that's coming in Salt Lake City at the place called it's kind of a small museum, privately held museum called the Leonardo, giving tribute to Leonardo da Vinci. But they brought this exhibit with all of these artifacts from Pompeii. Now, Pompeii, of course, in I think it was 67 or something AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted, and it just put all this ash and basically froze this Roman town, and just flat out in 12 to 14 feet of ash. But when they excavated it, it gave a really good, like a still photo picture of what life was like in the Roman Empire. And I gotta say, as I'm going through and all these exhibits, these are actual artifacts and recreations of the villas and the room and then the marketplace, all of Roman life. There was one part of the exhibit that had a warning sign on it that says, if you may be offended by this material, so if you're under 18 or guests with children, be aware. It was a good section. What was uncovered was the bordello, if you want to call it that, the place of pleasure. It was a center. It was one off the big Roman baths of Pompeii. My wife and I just went through that, and it was pretty doggone graphic. The paintings on the wall, the friezes, the sculptures. What disturbed me, Anna, was not the openness of it, but clearly there was a very viable market in pedophilia. Young children were procured in this Pompeii for the elite that could come in and satisfy their whims with children. I saw that. My stomach, I felt like retching. I thought, and what you said just brought that home to me. We are instead of learning from history, it seems like we're doomed to repeat it. And clearly that was, I think, the Roman Empire fell largely because of this lasciviousness, this preying on young children. I may be wrong with that assessment. There's a lot of other things going on, but man, the snapshot of ancient Rome, Pompeii, the Holy Roman Empire, if it was going on in Pompeii, the exhibit said, it was because it was going on everywhere in the Roman, under the Roman legionnaires and what they were doing. I'm sorry, that just, I didn't want to stay in the exhibit any longer. I said to my wife, I feel evilness about this now. I don't want to stay here. I had to leave. I didn't feel good about it. And we left, and it was kind of ruined my whole day. It was Sunday after church services. And I wasn't expecting that. I just wasn't. So I love why you introduced the topic. Yeah, you look at the House of Congress, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, will do whatever she needs to do under the banner of the Roman fasces, the bundle of sticks and the axes, which is what was carried by the Roman powers that be to exercise the power of Rome over their subjects. Why are Americans not aware of the symbolism of this right in their face? It's saying we honor Rome, we honor the Pope, we honor the Holy Roman Empire, and we are its subjects. So your comments, go ahead.
Well, it does go back even further than Rome, actually. It goes all the way back to Babylon and the great abomination that Abraham was fleeing when he left the city of Ur. and we begin our Bible history, okay? Many people are confused about what the great abomination is, and so was I for a time. So I, went through the whole learning process. The great abomination is the religion of Babylon, which worships the father of all lies. Now, he has many names. We call him Satan or the devil. The Greeks called him Poseidon. Further back in history, he's called Nimrod, the consort of Ashtoreth. And his Ashtoreth is also has many, many names. And get this, among the names are Isis, Astarte, Ashtoreth, Sybil, and Columbia, as in District of Columbia.
Shazam, Gomer says.
Shazam. Exactly.
You're right on, right on point.
What we're dealing with is a resurgence of this ancient pagan religion, which started in Babylon, which came across through the corridor, the Tigris-Euphrates river system, up through Iraq and around through Jordan and down to the Levant, to present-day Tel Aviv. Just outside of Tel Aviv, you'll see the great temple of Baalbek. And that was their major religious center, which was right on the sea, on the Mediterranean Sea. Part of this religion was worship of trees, worship of these very heinous gods, the father of all lies, of course, the mother of all harlots. Ashtoreth supposedly started the tradition of temple prostitution, and money, the use of money. There were many other things associated with this that came through. And when Rome conquered Carthage, the Carthaginians had built their society around this Babylonian religion. So all of the slaves that they brought from Carthage came to Rome, and with them brought their religion. So that is how this religion has moved steadily westward. The Romans took up this religion, And the Romans were pagan, and they basically let everybody believe whatever they wanted to believe and practice whatever they wanted to practice, so long as they gave their ultimate allegiance politically to Rome. Okay, so Rome was a very freewheeling kind of place even back in the day, and they just accepted and absorbed the great abomination. Along with this, you had an influx of priests of Sybil. Now remember, Sybil is yet another name of Ashtoreth, Isis, Astarte, Columbia. Okay, so these were priests of this particular religion coming from Asia Minor. They were called the Galli, and they wore black robes and white wigs, just like British barristers today. And they became the tax collectors for the Roman Caesars. This happened in the 2nd century BC. So these So these characters have been around since the 2nd century BC, and they have been tax collectors for Rome ever since.
Isn't that interesting? Thank you for that. Listen, let's go into the temple bar of the city of London, which is really where the barristers go. You swear an oath to the bar, the temple bar. What is, again, you look at that whole thing, isn't that an extension of what you're talking about here? The temple bar itself?
Yes, we have churches, we don't have temples. Think about it.
So, if an attorney swears a loyalty oath to the bar and gets a title of nobility from the British Crown called an esquire, does that mean that their loyalty is to the Crown, not to America?
Absolutely. 100%. They are British officers if they're esquires. The thing that you have to be aware of is that some people know what they're taking an oath to, and some people don't know what they're taking an oath to. So you can't just take a broad brush and paint them all with the same paint. But there are, to this day, adherents of the Great Abomination, and they do practice through the temple bar. There are also Christians who are unaware of really what the history and the background is, who are engaged in these activities without knowing the full range, history, and purpose of it.
I concur 100%. As Hosea said in the Old Testament, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Ignorance really is so, my goodness, it's pervasive and widespread. And I have a number of good close friends that are Christian. They're barristers, attorneys, and when I talk to them, about this concept, they don't deny it, but they're like they won't leave Babylon either. Tell us your story. You're in the legal profession as a judge. Tell us a little bit more about that. When did you become fully aware of this, and why are you now really marching against the grain or swimming upstream, so to speak? What caused you to do that?
I'm not a member of the bar.
Okay.
I can't be a member of the bar and serve my country. Our Constitution, our actual Constitution, was amended, and in 1819 or 1809, I can't remember right off the top of my head, but a long time ago, right? Mm-hmm. They put flesh to an earlier prohibition that was part of the very first rendition of the Constitution against split allegiances and acceptance of titles of nobility and emoluments from foreign governments. And the actual it's called the Titles of Nobility Amendment, or TONA, which was ratified by our states, actually forbids and prohibits and puts teeth to anyone who is a bar member or in receipt of any foreign title of office.
Okay, I was hoping we could get into this because I have declared that same thing we just said, and on this radio show, I've been broadcasting for 20 years, and a lot of it has to do with this very topic of the titles of nobility. Now, a lot of, and this is in Wikipedia, and the general consensus now is that was never fully ratified by the states because of the War of 1812 was declared before it could be fully ratified and in part as the Constitution. So they're saying that it's not part of our Constitution. I'm saying, but there's evidence to show that it was ratified. Which is it?
It was ratified. In fact, Virginia was the last state to ratify it. And it's, as a result, nobody who's part of the actual American government can be a member of the bar.
Wow.
So
that's huge. That's huge. Because people don't get that. That's huge.
Well, what you're seeing in Washington, D.C. are two federal subcontractors, both of them foreign. You're seeing the territorial government, the British territorial United States government, and the Papist municipal government, which is a franchise of the Roman municipal government. So you're seeing two foreign subcontractors. And of course, the attorneys can hold office in the territorial government because the British have always used the attorneys and have always adopted the Roman civil system. And the municipal government, of course, allows attorneys as tax collectors and has since the 2nd century BC. So, of course, the attorneys are allowed to be officials in those governments, but those governments are not our government. The whole point of this is that our government has been missing in action in those jurisdictions since 1860 and has never been reconstructed.
So 1860, let's put this into the time frame. The Civil War broke out about, 1859, 1860. So we're in the Civil War right now, right, at 1861. So how does, when you say 1860, what happened in 1860 that we lost this republic, if you will?
Abraham Lincoln was not eligible to be President of the United States of America. He was a bar attorney.
Bar attorney, okay.
He was accepted into the Illinois bar in 1839. And the prohibition against the titles, conflict of interest, the Titles of Nobility Amendment, meant that he could not serve as president of the United States of America. He could, however, serve as president of the United States, the municipal government. So you had a situation here where he couldn't actually serve in the intended office.
Wow. Okay, so he wasn't eligible.
Well, that caused a schism in the original Confederation.
Okay.
Those states that wanted to remain loyal took a walk, and the other states that either didn't understand what was going on or who had other interests went the other direction. But one of the big things that we don't understand about our own history is that the Civil War wasn't a war. It was a mercenary conflict like Vietnam. And it was not fought by states. It was not a declared war. It was a mercenary conflict, and it was fought by states of states, not states. Okay? This is a concept that many people have trouble with. But we have our states, right? We have Virginia, Maine, Massachusetts, Texas, Louisiana, right?
Uh-huh.
So what are these other things called states of states, like the state of Louisiana, the state of Wisconsin, the state of Minnesota? Well, the word of means besides, in addition to, belonging to, apart from, without. Okay? So these are not states. These are states of states. And states of states are basically business organizations that provide governmental services as contractors. All right? So the Civil War wasn't a war, it was a mercenary conflict, and it was fought by confederation states of states. Everybody remember the Articles of Confederation? Okay, I'll give you the breakdown here. The Union formed July 4th, well, it was published July 4th, 1776. Everybody knows that date, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, go forward to September of that year, and those original states formed the United States of America, a federation of the actual states. We're talking Virginia, Vermont, New Hampshire, Georgia, right? We're talking states formed a federation in September of 1776, and then in 1781, they formed a confederation of states. And those states of states were the state of Florida, the state of Georgia, the state of Massachusetts, right? These were business organizations that were charged with doing business for the states.
Okay.
All right? So, and those are the entities that were part of the Confederation of States that broke apart over Lincoln's election and that fought the entire Civil War. It had nothing to do with the actual states at all. It had to do with these business organizations that were charged with doing business for the states. The Confederation, all of them were Confederation states. There were Northern Confederation states and Southern Confederation states. And the South took the name the Confederate States of America. So that gives you some other history that has been obscured and that nobody knows. Okay? So, and if you look at the rosters, when you go back in the history and you look at the rosters where these men were actually mustered out into these various platoons and groups and portions of both the Confederate Army and the Union Army, the Grand Army of the Republic, what you find is that they're all listed under the state of New York, the state of Pennsylvania, the state of Ohio. They're not mustered out under Ohio. They're not mustered out under New York. So, I'm not just blowing this in the wind or telling you some big story. The actual historical records support every word I'm telling you.
Right. They weren't federal troops. They were called that, but they were always under the state jurisdiction. The state militia, basically, is what they were.
Well, they were
state
of. State of.
State. Yes.
Business organizations, not states. We've been fooled by the tricky verbiage here because they call them Confederate states, but our ancestors knew the difference. We don't. We don't know the difference between a federal state and a Confederate state. Okay? And the difference is there's the actual state that we think of that's geographically defined, right?
Right.
And then there's the state of state which is an inchoate, incorporated or corporate business entity.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get you to delineate. Yeah, it's a corporate body. It's basically to do business. It's a business regulation state, and so we have the local corporate states, that are individual cities that are also there to do business as corporations, corporate bodies, if you will. And again, then what governs all of that? Isn't that just not really the law of the land? It's the commercial code. The Uniform Commercial Code is business regulation. Is that where you want to go with this? Code.
I'm trying to break out the jurisdictions for you.
Right.
Okay. Let's take a seg back to the Bible and to religion, because law comes from religion. All law comes from religion, and it can be from pagan religions as well as Christian religions, or any kind of religion. It could come from Hindu religion. Law comes from religion. So when you deal with law, you're dealing with religion. You're dealing with beliefs and values and ethics and moral systems. Okay?
Structure, basically, yes. The law of Moses is a law. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, all law comes from religion, so you have to deal with religion when you deal with law. And the United States, the Union that was formed in 1776, declared its law under the Wycliffe Bible. And that's where you get the actual phrase that Lincoln used, government of the people, by the people, for the people, right? That comes directly from the Wycliffe Bible. Now, Thomas Wycliffe was a Christian martyr and a hero of the Protestant Reformation who was murdered and tortured for the quote-unquote crime of translating the Latin Vulgate Bible into English.
Right.
So the people, the word people actually means Hebrew. In Hebrew, it means militia. Okay? And so the people being referred to in that sense was Joshua's army that conquered Canaan. Okay? They were the people. And then a little bit later, you wind up with Gideon's army. Now, Gideon's army was mixed up of living people, right? And unseen angels. You remember the story?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the people in Gideon's army are the ones with the capital P. They are the ones that are seen and unseen. They're the ones that are the state citizens army. Okay? So you have two kinds of people, the small p and the people with a capital P that you see on the constitutions. And that particular law came from the Geneva Bible. So our land and our soil, respectively, are under the law of those two Bibles, which are foreign with respect to the Catholic faith. Okay? So along comes King James, and of course this is long before the Revolution, and the King James Bible comes out, and that is adopted by the Catholic and ecumenical community at that time as the standard for the law of the sea. Is this all beginning to make a little more sense to you? That you've got these levels, these jurisdictions that have their own law, and their Bible is the basis of that law? So we have three Bibles, three jurisdictions, and that's why we also have different kinds of law dictionaries. That's why when we're talking about law of the land, you're talking about Bouvier's dictionary and its definitions versus blacks, which is all the C and the municipal jurisdiction. And you'll notice that it just came out, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it came out that the publishers of Black's Law Dictionary admitted it was a spoof. But they just sat around and made up all this stuff. But anyway, it goes along with the great abomination and the entire theme of worshiping the father of all lies. It also goes along with Roman civil law, which has as a great tenet of its structure, and remember, this is all pagan, that let him be deceived, let him who will be deceived be deceived. In other words, under Roman civil law, if you're stupid and you don't know any better, it's fair game to take advantage of you, and the Roman civil law won't lift a finger to help you. It has no real interest in justice per se. It has an interest in appearance of justice. And that is exactly what we have here in this country, because we've been operating under, guess what? Roman civil law. And haven't had the benefit of being even told that much by the perpetrators of this scheme.
Interesting. Let me give you a little bit of background history of where I'm coming from. I want to get your opinion on what I'm going to tell you next. I graduated actually in accounting and business administration. I gave my accounting professors at the university where I went to absolute fits because I don't know, maybe my brain's wired a little differently as I'm into a tax accounting classes, and we're getting the definitions of the legal terminology under the IRS code, right? Well, I'm sitting there, excuse me, why does this not make sense to anybody? How can you have a definition? They defined, the IRS code defined gross income as income from all sources. And I said, excuse me, they're never defining income. Why? How can you say gross income on the level of the 1040 form is not defined? You got to define what income is. So I go back into both, the legal Black's Law Dictionary and others. Define income is simply your increase. So you don't really pay taxes on your basis. If you put $50,000 in a CD that's already been taxed, that's your basis. You only pay increase on the income. And so my whole point being, if human beings have an intrinsic value, if they have a basis in their education and their ability to contribute to society, and we declare that basis to the IRS, then there's no way there can be an income tax because it's not an increase. And my professor was like, no, you're thinking too obtuse. It's not that way. I says, why not? I mean, we're basically declaring to the IRS when we sign our forms that we have zero value, intrinsic value, that we're basically worthless every year, that we have no value as a human being. I say that's wrong. So what he said, okay, well, you can write to the IRS, which I did. I wrote a letter and had it worded out, the legal definition of all this, and asked them for their absolute opinion on it under the code, their law. And here I am, a student. I'm 21 years old writing this out, and I registered it, returned receipt, requested. I know they got it. Nothing was answered. They wouldn't answer me. So I sent him another letter. Please answer. And then using my business law trained business law professor, there's an attorney's legal term that if you don't answer in a specific set of time, you basically acquiesce to the premise, okay? If you don't legally respond, then it becomes granted, basically. Oh, I don't remember the Latin term that we used. So this is the third letter. I declared that this would happen, and they never responded again. And so in my final exam of tax accounting, we were to basically do a tax return as our final exam. There was kind of a small business, put a professional corporation did that. And I just said, okay, I had the professional write a declaration that based on his median average net worth as an engineer, he was in the median of his profession, though he had intrinsic value that he declared to the IRS, and so he had basically, after expenses, zero taxes to pay. Now, to see, the whole purpose of a good tax accountant, I was told, is to avoid taxes that are legally, find the law and apply the law so you can reduce taxes and tax liability. You don't want to not declare your taxes under, your Social Security responsibilities, right? Oh my goodness! My professor said you can't use this. It's not. You have no basis for it. I says I have every basis. We went through this over the whole year, the whole 3 quarters of the school year. The IRS has not responded. So it declares that we are right on this. I argued till they gave me a passing grade, and I got to say that I presented this to a bunch of tax preparers, and they asked me to do a PowerPoint presentation, and this led me to go back to the whole IRS and what happened in 1913. The IRS is a for-profit corporation. The Federal Reserve is also a private for-profit money-making corporation under a corporate body of a corporation that runs the Columbia. I mean, it's all under the direction of I found 2 entities: the City of London and the Roman government. It's all tied into that. And so I presented this at the Freedom Forum down in Pasadena, and it was quite well attended. I mean, I had a few IRS agents there that wanted to learn. One in particular was an African American woman who was asking questions on her own but never received answers. And I was after the presentation, I was given a card by a gentleman. He asked me to have breakfast with him the next morning. And here's this man. He was a Hollywood movie producer named Aaron Russo. And Aaron was like attending this to basically, because his good friend was a Rockefeller. I think Jay Rockefeller was his very good friend. And he wanted to absolutely do a documentary to expose these well-meaning, well-intentioned Americans that didn't believe the IRS was legitimate and yada yada. So he came to hear me speak and declared. He says, "I think you're well-meaning, but I think you're very naive." I said, "Okay, Mr. Russo, I may well be, but I want you to prove to me what I've said in my presentation is right. I don't see where this is ever the law that says we have to pay taxes ever been the law of the land or anything. Show me the law. Show me the law, please. And if you can't, then you have to say that this is all a charade, a card game, a sting operation." Well, Mr. Russo says, "I can prove this. I'll make a few phone calls and we'll definitely do that. If you're sincere, will you do a retraction?" I says, "Absolutely. If I'm wrong, I will retract. I'm trying to find the truth." That's the end of the story. Well, after about 6-7 months, Mr. Russo didn't do a documentary film, but it wasn't what he was expected. It was called America from Freedom to Fascism. I don't know if you've ever watched that, Anna, but my goodness. Yeah, that's one part of it. As he was going to do a sequel or a series of sequels and exposing the whole thing until he got sick with cancer and got too sick to do it, the next series of films. wow, people have forgotten, I think, a lot about Mr. Russo's work and his film, and I loved him. He was so incredibly genuine. And he went right up to the head of the IRS, Mr. Cohen, and was very nice to him. Says, "Show me." And the double talk, the actual Yiddish cursing he was given blew him away. It's all there on the tape. It was amazing. Why aren't American people more willing to stand for the truth of this? Why are they just able to say, "Well, it don't matter. I'm just going to roll with the flow"? In other words, what's the solution to the problem, Anna?
Well, you want answers to your long-standing questions? How old are you?
Oh my goodness, 60. I'm a big 6'0".
Okay, so you've been waiting 40 years for this answer. The only definition of income that has ever been official was rendered by the Supreme Court, and here it is: profit separated from capital. Okay?
Wow, yeah, makes sense to me.
Okay. Income is a corporate accrual. You can't have income if you're not a corporation.
Okay, so I get you.
It's not even possible. It's not possible to have income if you're not a corporation. And you were right. But your basis was stolen. It was collected by the Queen. You're absolutely right. You had your accounting principles right. But it was stolen by the Queen. The Queen comes along and registers you as a British territorial United States citizen, and therefore a dependent of hers. Okay? And a pauper, having no basis except what you donate to the crown. All right? So the Queen latches on to you, pretends that you're a British territorial United States citizen, a pauper, and a dependent of the British crown. Therefore, chattel backing the British Crown Corporation and a franchise of the British Crown Corporation. And that is how they steal your basis. All right? And it's all bullshit. Pardon my French. But anyway, it's all just complete and utter, fantasy fraud.
Well, that's what I showed. I showed that to Mr. Russo. I said the IRS will never answer that because there's no winning to that. They actually define income. See.
Here's the rest of the story. The Queen works as the overseer of the Commonwealth for the Pope.
Okay.
So they each benefit, they each take cuts out of your basis and leave you to be the chattel, all right? The chattel property. So now here's the rest of the story. The IRS is a private trust that for many years was operated in Puerto Rico by the Roman Catholic Church under the Spanish law of the Inquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Ah!
Yeah, I knew that. I found that in my research. Yeah.
Okay. So what you've really been dealing with here with these IRS flunkies are inquisitors.
And also, okay, how does this tie in? I've also found that it also ties into the U.S. Virgin Islands because a lot of the tax, this goes back into your property taxes. If you trace where the money for the property tax collection goes, I was shocked to find a full 1/3 of the property taxes ends up in a British Crown account in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Do you know about? Yeah, I was sitting there. What?
When they seize upon your basis, they seize all of it. They seize upon your public and your private assets. And so what they've been doing is they've been taxing you for the use of your own property in your name. They've been
Yeah,
redefining you as a tenant when you are in fact the landlord and the actual free man and holding that land in freehold. And they've done this by just nothing but guile and trickery and a lot of con artist legalese crapola. That's all.
Okay. Yeah. Anna, you are absolutely right on. You're letting me connect a lot of dots. I knew this, but again, what do we do about it? I'm kind of feeling like, and I have for a lot of time. We know the truth, and the Bible says that Jesus said, "The truth shall set you free." Well, okay, I know this, but then how can we truly emancipate ourselves without getting, assassinated or worse, put into a prison as a political prisoner or whatever? We got 5 minutes to the break, Anna. I know that's a tough question, but I bet that's what most of our listeners are saying. Okay, what you're saying is true, right? But so what? How do we change it? How do we emancipate ourselves, get out of this bondage? That's what I want to tackle in the next second hour. Specific things we can do, and what is the ramifications of doing so? Okay, what kind of targets being placed on our chest, if you will? We've got a few minutes to the break. Do you want to just kind of start onto that, chewing on that rawhide bone?
We're not the ones with the targets on our breasts. They are. And they're being targeted by the entire rest of the outraged world because we're not alone. We've been, okay, we were the first victims in modern times, but we are by far not the only victims. This entire system has been extended worldwide. Everybody is affected by it. There are only 6 nations that aren't. So, when you're talking about Rome and the quote-unquote commercial feudalism and corporate feudalism of the Holy Roman Empire, which Voltaire famously said isn't holy, isn't Roman, and isn't an empire, you're talking about a gang of criminals. And there's no politics involved in this. This is all just business. And it's all criminal. It's all con artistry. It's all phony baloney. In fact, the word phony comes from Phoenician, and they didn't disappear any more than the Dutch East India Company disappeared. This we're just dealing with a whole gang of criminals. And as a fact, they don't have anywhere to go. Once their cover is blown, once their lies are recognized, once those of us who are not deceived stand up and say, hey, I'm not deceived, that guy cheated me, and here's how, and here's when, and here's why, and he's a rat, well, then all of a sudden the Roman civil law does its duty, as it has to. And the Roman civil law is very draconian. I don't know if any of you went to see the original Harry Potter movie. I did with my son, just check it out. The Sorcerer's Stone, there's a scene there where they're playing wizard's chess. And these megalithic-sized chess pieces just start moving around the board, and they go click and clank, and they bash into each other and explode. Well, that's what happens when the Roman civil law actually gets engaged. The pieces start moving all on their own, and whatever is in the way gets mashed. Well, they're the ones that are getting mashed because they are the ones at fault, and they are the ones that have been discovered. They are the deceivers. They are the criminals, not us.
Well, I agree with that, but the reality is they have the badges and the enforcement in the prisons and the, shall we say, the judges, the corrupt judges, the tax collectors to put you in a way for sedition or whatever. I mean, this is what Russo and I discussed, okay? What do you do when you know the truth? And I said, well, we have to get a grassroots educational process going. which is why he said, I got to do this movie and expose the truth. Hey, we got to take a break. My guest and I, Judge Anna Von Reitz from Great City, Alaska. We're coming back after these short messages. Stay tuned, folks. Don't go away. This is the story behind the story. Oh, and we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second hour of tonight's story behind the story. This topic has been one that I've long felt is critically important, but what I think and what the general public, for the most part, thinks often come head to head. I've been accused and actually been written many hate letters saying I'm anti-American crackpot, that I better shut up and quit sowing discord, basically calling fire in a crowded movie theater type of thing, and by the people that you think should be the biggest supporters of finding the truth of this whole thing now. And instead of, it goes back into ad hominem attacks on me personally, my character, my mental state, even call into question. I thought, okay, well, Mr. Russo, for one, took the challenge and was honest in his assessment and lost his friendship with Mr. Rockefeller over it, I'm sure. And who knows, was probably, I've been called a conspiracy theorist and much worse, because I don't believe his cancer was accidental. I do believe he was targeted. I do. He had too much, especially what he was planning on episode 2 and 3 of his documentaries. And the fact that he couldn't get this to get any real playtime in American theaters, the Hollywood establishment that used to be so supportive of this work. I mean Eddie Murphy's Trading Places, a number of very very big hit films, just kind of got blackballed. It was worse than McCarthyism. And yet he's just telling the unvarnished truth, trying to find answers. And suddenly there's just clearly things that are just taboo, which brings the bigger picture in really who controls the Hollywood, the sorcery, witchcraft, who controls the big picture of the mainstream media to keep people abjectly stupid, to keep them from waking up out of their stupor, as the philosopher Goethe said, and I said this many times, it's on my wall in my office, Judge Anna. No man is more hopelessly enslaved, Goethe wrote, than he who falsely believes that he's free. And in this area, if you think you're a free American citizen with rights under the Constitution, and that's all flat out not reality, well, what do you do about it? Okay, where do we go from here? Is I guess the question is. And I don't want to dominate the conversation. I don't want to be a monologue. I want a dialogue here. And I know our people in the Philippines want to jump in. Major Burdock and Philip, I'm sure, have some questions. So I'm going to take a back seat here. I've given my 2 cents worth into the show. Major, do you have any questions for Anna that you want to jump in with?
Yeah, specifically, by the way, thanks. For always a pleasure to be on the show, True. It's wonderful, beautiful morning over here in Manila, and we're wishing you a beautiful, wonderful new year. You and Anna, nice to meet you, Anna. We've got, you were asking, well, towards the end of the last hour, well, what do we do? What do we do about this? And, I'm listening intently the entire first hour and on my laptop researching everything that's being said, and I'm starting to think of it, and maybe I've got a pretty simple mind, but what we don't do, and you know me, True, I somehow always get back to the Second Amendment. We don't give up our guns. That's the biggest thing that we've got that we need to hang on to. And last week was absolutely terrible. Again, They're starting in again, the powers that be that are controlling information and are on a complete attack against the First and Second Amendments. I'm talking about Facebook, YouTube, Google, Twitter, you name it. The larger companies, these people. And I'd really like Anna's opinion on that, in that, I noticed that she's a duck hunter, and she's most folks that live in Alaska enjoy their and exercise their Second Amendment rights, and how that ties in to what we're talking about. I mean, if there's this monstrous body out there, and they're actually going to be doing something outside, getting down to land ownership and our civil rights, that's the reason that it's number two, and then number two is protecting number one. And I just really was curious to tie in the Second Amendment, because it's something that, just like I said last week, was just terrible what's been happening, and we can get into that later. I'll probably be writing an article about it, but yeah, that's pretty much the question regarding the Second Amendment. I'd like to know Anna's belief on that, and what her thoughts are, and if she's perceiving a threat at the moment.
All right. I just sent an email to the Pope tonight, and that was an official notice to him about the situation in Virginia. And basically, I'm making him responsible, and the Holy See, and the municipality of Rome, if we have any problem here at all. They will be personally and commercially liable. So they won't make any money off of it. That's what motivates these people. Profit, control. That's all that they're after, is assets. They are completely materialistic. They don't give a fine-flying one about anything else. So if you find ways of taking away their toys and taking away their money, then they lose interest in their ugly activities. It's like dealing with a 2-year-old with a hammer. You have to distract them and get the hammer away from them and deny them the joy that they're getting out of bashing things. Okay? Now, I want to say, make a real slight aside here. I want to say that there are millions and millions and millions of sincere Catholics out there who really do treasure and are devoted to the teachings of Jesus. And I have the utmost respect for them. But they haven't known what was going on in their church any more than we've known what was going on in our government. Okay? So, to answer your question more directly about the issue of the Second Amendment gun rights, there are 3 kinds of citizen involved here. There are American state citizens. There are United States citizens. And there are citizens of the United States. Now that all sounds the same to most people. It all just sort of blurs together. Well, citizen, state citizen, So it is perhaps best to think about state citizens as being on one side of the fence, and both the United States citizens and the citizens of the United States being on the other side of the fence. State citizens are what you are when you're born. You are you're not quite a state citizen yet. You're a state national as a minor. Okay, you're born in, say, Wisconsin, like I was, and as a minor, I'm a state national. My nationality comes from my state. I'm a Wisconsinite, okay? If you were born in New York, you're a New Yorker. If you were born in Connecticut, you're a Connecticut, okay? That's your actual nationality, because your state is a country. It's an actual country. And so when you grow up and you turn 21, you are enabled to act as a state citizen. So that's what I'm talking about when I say a state citizen. State citizens owe a singular allegiance to their state. Okay? And it has to be that way. Otherwise, you wind up with people trying to vote in 2 or 3 states and, interfere in politics all over the place. So if you're a Wisconsinite, you're a Wisconsinite. If you're a Texan, you're a Texan. All right? That's how state citizenship works. Federal citizenship, which applies to both United States citizens and citizens of the United States, is a whole different bailiwick. Operates in different jurisdiction and comes from different sources. So those two kinds of citizen are radically different. Now, we have 2 kinds of federal citizen. We have United States citizens, which are British territorial United States citizens, okay, under the Queen. And we have municipal citizens of the United States that are under the Pope. Actually, they're all ultimately under the Pope because, remember, the British territorial government is a commonwealth. And as a commonwealth, the Queen oversees it for the Pope. So the Pope is indirectly in charge of the territorial government through the Queen, and he's directly in charge of the municipal government through the municipality of Rome. All right? Anyway, both of these federal citizens are created under the constitutions. All right? If you look at any version of Constitution that's readily available, whether you're looking at the Constitution for the United States or the Constitution for of the United States of America, look at Article 1, Section 2, Clause 2. Look at Article 1, Section 3, Clause 3. This is where those citizenship statuses are established and created. These federal citizens would not have a citizenship except for the constitutions. Our state citizenship would still be there if there were no constitution. But their citizenship depends entirely upon the constitutions. So again, completely different proposition. As state citizens, we are parties to the Constitution. We hold one side of that contract, and either the Queen or the Pope holds the other side of that contract. We can enforce that contract against them. We can make them deliver the services and abide by the guarantees that they owe us under the constitutional agreements as state citizens. But if we adopt the status of a United States citizen or as a municipal citizen of the United States, then they owe us nothing. Then we are their employees or dependents, and they can tell us how far to jump, which they do. Now, we have been deliberately mischaracterized and misidentified as federal citizens. And federal citizens, which are created under the constitutions, that's a political status that doesn't exist except as a result of the constitutions, have no constitutional guarantees, and have no rights that are recognized under the constitutions. That's what the entire civil rights movement was about. I'm constantly amazed that people lived through the entire civil rights movement, and apparently most Americans never stopped to consider what this was all about and, what were these civil rights supposed to be equal to? Well, they were supposed to be equal to the natural and unalienable rights that Americans possess at birth. Okay? So Americans, American state nationals, American state citizens still have all of the guarantees and still have all of the rights that they ever had. The problem is that we've been misidentified as federal citizens and treated as federal citizens. And we haven't been aware of the process. This has been done secretively, and it's been an unlawful conversion, is what it's called in the law. And so they've done this unlawful conversion of our political status and our assets to their favor without telling us. We've been given no disclosure whatsoever by our subcontractors, and we are their employers. Okay? So what we do, first and foremost, is that we wake up. Remember what I told you about the Roman civil law? Let him who will be deceived be deceived. Okay, so we wake up and we go, I'm not any federal citizen. I am not a British territorial as if I were born in Puerto Rico, and I surely am not a member of the municipal government of the District of Columbia, and I was not born there, and I don't work for the Washington, D.C. municipality. So, thank you very much. I am an American. I am not a U.S. person. I'm an American person. And under Article 4 of the Constitutions, whichever Constitution you want to read, I am owed protection. I am owed all of these guarantees, including the Second Amendment. And by the way, you have a lot of falsified documents to clean up. And that's exactly the situation that this governor, and I use that word lightly, in Virginia has. Someone brought up his oath of office, and I took the time in the reader chat room to dissect what that oath of office really says. And the first thing that I notice about it, being schooled and knowing what I'm reading, is that he's taking his oath of office to the, with a small t, Constitution of the Virginia Commonwealth, or the Commonwealth of Virginia. Okay, first of all, he's not taking his oath to any state. He's taking it to a commonwealth, which is a completely different beastie in the municipal bailiwick. And he's not acting as our governor, he's acting as their governor. And furthermore, he's taking his oath to the municipal corporation. He's not taking it to the municipal government, he's taking it to the municipal corporation, because if he were taking his oath to the municipal government, it would be to the, with a capital T, upper lowercase, Constitution of the Virginia Commonwealth, or Commonwealth of Virginia, whatever they're calling themselves. Okay? So it's not a state governor. Doesn't have a thing to do with us. It has to do with municipal issues and municipal citizens. And we don't even know what this Constitution says or what it requires this man to do. It's a private constitution. It may exist in the District of Columbia records. It may exist in the municipality of Washington, D.C. records. But I don't have one on my desk, and it would probably be pretty costly for me to get one. So here this man is, and he has all the authority of a Rotary Club president. We're talking about a group of people, a subpopulation, calling itself the Virginia Commonwealth or the Commonwealth of Virginia, whatever name they come up with for themselves. They're operating under their own little constitution. We have no idea what that constitution says because it's a municipal document, doesn't have anything to do with us. And he's going out here and ramming around and exercising all this power that he has no right to, no authority whatsoever. If they want to confiscate the guns of all of their employees, they're welcome to. But the moment they touch the guns of an American, then they've committed treason against the Constitution that they owe that American. And at that point, it becomes very, very serious for those individuals who've done this, because they can be taken out, lined up, and shot. Now, there are some people that would like to do that. I advise very strongly against it. What you need to do is deal with this as a business matter and as a criminal matter. He owes a contract. His boss, the Queen, owes a contract. His boss, the Pope, the ultimate boss of the bosses, owes us a contract. So we enforce the contract. We give him notice. We tell him exactly what we expect from our side of that contract. And we let them know by the bucket loads that we are not federal citizens, are not now, never have been, never will be. We are Americans, and we are owed the constitutional agreements by international treaty and by commercial contract. The constitutions are commercial service contracts. The Pope and the Queen are both subcontractors under the constitutions, not over the constitutions. So it's just time for everybody worldwide to wake up, because this same situation is going on in Great Britain, the same situation is happening in France, the same thing in Germany. All over this world, we have these governmental services corporations who have usurped upon the actual national governments, and they think they're going to get away with it. They think that we're all asleep and that we're just going to be acquiescing to all of their demands and paying all their bills for them and putting up with this. So the first step is to get yourself out of the mire, get yourself out of their trap, and you do that by making it clear what your political status is. You have to go back to the county registrar in the county where you were born and give them notice that you are an American state national or an American state citizen, and that you have been improperly registered, and you wish the registration to be removed and the record to be corrected. You do this using a correction instrument. That's what they actually call the document that you need to use, a correction instrument. And it needs to be a statement that is properly witnessed under, now get this, under penalty of perjury under the public law of the United States of America, upper and lower case. The is actually part of the proper name of our country and our federation. Okay, so it's upper and lower case, and the is part of the name. So anyway, first of all, you have to get your own political status cleared up. You have to make your declaration of political status. You have to declare your permanent home and domicile. And these are things that we're never told how to do. We're never told that we have to do this. We've been left adrift, and people simply have not been given full disclosure, and they have not been given any assistance by our subcontractors, who certainly owed it to us. And as a result, we're now picking up the pieces and having to make these corrections and get ourselves out of these bogus contracts and retrieve our assets, which are not chattel, and restore our own rights, which are not subject to the Queen or the Pope, and rebuild and restore our entire government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Living people. Everyone on earth knows that our government is a living structure built by living people. It is not a corporate structure. It is not incorporated at all. All right, so the idea that a corporation...
I'm sorry, the question that I have, though, is I just fear that these 18 people that Governor Northam has recently hired to enforce this new law to take away people's guns is not going to, they're not going to be understanding of what your status is. Certainly, they're not going to be receptive to any of that. They're going to come to your home, and I'm just fearful for their lives right now. And I don't think it can be done on an individual level, because if you try to explain that to these people, these guys aren't going to understand that. They're going to come in and get your guns, and somebody's going to get shot.
Yeah, they're Pinkertons. They're thugs. They're brain dead. They don't know what they're doing. But the Pope knows what they're doing.
I hear that a lot of these cops, I mean, that's got to be a hard job for them, and I certainly support the police officers and their job, but they've got to have really mixed feelings about it. I have a feeling that they're hiring new people because nobody that is there wants that job. I mean, who's going to want that job? Most police officers...
They're hiring UN mercenaries to enforce it. They're hiring UN mercenaries. But... no, we're not going to allow that. The Pope knows what his deal is. The Queen knows what her deal is. And once they're called on it, which they have been, they don't have any choice. They have to pull in their horns. They have to retract their officer. They have to pull him in line. It's not my business or yours to tell him what to do. It's their business to tell him what to do, and it's our business to tell the Pope and the Queen what to do, because they are operating under our delegated authority. Okay, so you've got the whole thing wrong. My problem isn't with their officer. My problem is with them. And so is yours. They have to abide by their contracts and their treaties. And if they don't, then the entire world has to know about it. So, this whole situation in Virginia is one renegade guy who doesn't understand that he's the governor of a commonwealth and that not everybody is a member of his commonwealth. It's up to the Queen and the Pope to tell him what to do and what to say and what to think. They're foreign with respect to us, but they owe us obligations up the wazoo. So instead of sitting around here and worrying about, Joe Blow, police bloke, who's going to come in here and try to take guns away from us, our argument is with the Pope, who's misidentified us as municipal citizens and created this entire mess. Now, we're not going to go to any kind of civil war over this. We're going to hold his feet to the fire. We're going to hold the whole Roman Curia's feet first to the fire. We're going to take their money. We're going to take their tax-exempt status. We're going to blow their entire little, very profitable bailiwick to kingdom come if they do anything that displeases us at all. Because we are not the debtors. They are the debtors in this whole entire situation. They owe us billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. They haven't paid us our share of what's ours for 160 years. And they've owed it the entire time. Like I told you, they stole the basis of all these Americans, and that is all due and owing. Imagine it. They stole the basis of your great-grandparents, and that is all due and owing. This is a commercial deal. That's why they were all set up trying to kill off their priority creditors. That's why they set up all these FEMA camps and all these railroad junctures. They were going to do the same thing to us that they tried to do, and did do, more or less, in Germany. Same exact stuff. They wanted to kill off the priority creditors because they couldn't pay them back. Well, they can't pay us back either. But that's, neither here nor there. They can try to pay us back, and they can get their They can get their filthy paws out of our pockets. They can get their thugs out of our streets. And they can stop trying to pretend that they're doing anything or being anything but criminals. And that's how we have to treat this. This is not political. This is business. This is crime. Pure and simple. I don't know if that really
I appreciate that.
made you happy.
I think it's pretty interesting, some of the recent footage that came out from the Pope. But unfortunately, the one of the best weapons, sadly enough, is the media, and we've certainly experienced that on our side of things over here. Won't go into that. Maybe True can fill you in on what we've experienced. We were recently in Washington, D.C., but the media needs to be aware of this as some form of weapon. I mean, and it is a weapon. And what I found interesting was that people really started to lose. I don't know if the Pope has an approval rating, but I guarantee you, if they do monitor that, his approval rating just shot way down. Recently with this person that grabbed him. I don't know if you saw that video, and video does speak a lot, unfortunately, because most people don't read anymore. But when you see the Pope pulling away from people, and then this other footage of him pulling his hand away from people, kissing the ring, which is a tradition, which is something that even here in the Philippines, which is a 95% Catholic country, and there are very good things about it. Very good things about Catholicism in this country. But if you want to do something about the Pope, you're going to need the help of the media, and getting more of that, and really exploiting what's gone on, especially in Australia with the Catholic Church, and all of these other places where unconvicted sex offenders are being transferred to and being hidden away, and are still being paid. And again, I love the idea of tax-exempt status. I mean, that's one thing we certainly can do. Certainly, that should have been lost a long time ago when an organization is doing something as egregious as systematic abuse and cover-up of children. It's probably, I mean, that's something that I think every human being, you don't need to be a particular religion or have any religion to understand that you need to take care of your children and don't sexually assault and murder them. I think anyone that does that, you're off any list, including tax exemption. So hopefully something happens here. And I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Somebody really does need to take a look at the Vatican, and there's been a couple of things going on with Q recently. I don't know if you're familiar with the Q phenomenon. I'm not one of the Q subscribers. Q does exist, but we're not going to get any further than that. Q is posts on our network. That's how it communicates to the world. But there's a lot of really good research that comes out of those folks, and certainly regarding the Catholic Church, it's an alternate area of research that people can look at. Yeah, fascinating. Really, yes, of course.
Okay, there's the Catholic Church, and then there's the Roman Catholic Church. This goes back to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when Emperor Constantine recognized Christianity as a state religion of Rome. Okay? It just so happens that ever since then, there has been a bifurcated leadership role for the Pope, and there has been a pagan temple coexisting within the Roman Catholic Church. And you see this with the Pope wearing two hats. You have seen his what's called the papal tiara, It's this big fancy 3-level crown, and then he wears just a simple little skull cap. When he's acting in his sacred office, he is acting as a Christian priest, but when he is operating in his pontifical office, he's acting as a pagan Roman priest. And that pagan Roman religion is the same great abomination that started off in Babylon, came to the Levant, came to Carthage, came to Rome, and then was transferred to Wales, Cornwall, and Ireland, and England, eventually, by the Roman invaders. Okay, so we're talking about a religion, a secret religion, which has been using the Roman Catholic Church as a storefront for 1,700 years. And most Catholics have not been aware of this at all. Most of them are only aware of the sacred office. And so you have these very good people, and they've been used as a storefront for this very venal pagan religion. And maybe I should get into a little bit of what this religion really does. It believes in temple prostitution. You had to go to the temple and pay a prostitute and have sex with her, and this was supposed to relieve you of your debts and sins. And you had to pay her for this service, or him. Either way, they swung either way. They also believed in child sacrifice. You see this in the Bible. There are numerous sections of the Bible where God says, I didn't tell you to pass your sons and daughters through the fire. What they're talking about there is that this venal pagan religion actually had new parents. Their firstborn had to be thrown alive into a burning fiery furnace and burned alive to satisfy the god Moloch. Okay? So our God didn't tell them to do this, but the 10 tribes of Israel were lost. They were lost to the true God, and they began sacrificing to Moloch and adhering to this foreign Babylonian religion, which the actual Jews call the Great Abomination, or the Synagogue of Satan. Okay? This is the same religion. It has always practiced infanticide. It has always practiced pedophilia, bestiality, sex as a sacrament. All of these evils, all of these things, are all part of the religion of the Great Abomination. And so what you're seeing here, these pedophilia cases and these child sacrifice and all of that, that's all part of this ancient venal religion, which actually kind of came through the door with Vatican II. I mean, it's been there for 1,500 years or 1,700 years, but, it started to really show its face with Vatican II. And that was in 1963, and that's the same year that Jack Kennedy was killed, the same year that the new American dollars that were asset-backed were held back. We've got trillions and trillions of dollars, asset-backed dollars, basically sitting on the quay there in the Philippines, waiting for all of this to be resolved. So, this shouldn't be coming as so much a surprise if you know about the Great Abomination, and certainly every Christian should know about the Great Abomination, what it was, what it means. One of the prophecies of Jesus was, when you see the Great Abomination standing where it should not stand, you'll know that the days are short. Well, guess what? We have a statue of the Great Abomination, Ashtoreth, the foreign goddess, the consort of the devil, sitting in New York Harbor. Ashtoreth is always depicted as a beautiful woman with rays of light coming out of her head. And what do we have in New York Harbor? We've got an idol standing in New York Harbor. Literally, a pagan idol. And it's an idol of Ashtoreth that we've been conned into accepting as the Statue of Liberty. And while we're on that topic, you hear the word liberty all the time. Well, what does that remind you of? The word libertine and the word liberty are out of the same root word. Liberty is what British sailors get when they come to port. Okay?
Sex.
Yeah, sex, liquor, drugs, you name it, go have a fight. That's liberty. Freedom is what we're owed. Freedom is what the American ideal is. Okay, so again, a federal citizen gets liberty, but we're owed freedom. Two different things.
So when Patrick Henry gets up and give me liberty or give me death, we kind of know what that really means. Yeah. I gotta ask.
Well,
we're go ahead.
Like many other words, it has many meanings. And at the time that the revolution was going on, it didn't have quite the unsavory or improper meanings attached to it that it did earlier. Say 200 years earlier, it was really well recognized as the liberty-libertine connection I just told you. At the time of the revolution, it had gotten, again, confused with freedom.
Right. I gotta shift gears a little bit because I wanted to. I get what you're saying. There's as absolute connections to the Vicar of Christ, the Holy See, all of this, all the different titles, the names the Pope uses. But again, when in my research, I showed that actually, if you go to Rome, there in the river, there's this right below the Vatican, which is an independent state, right? An independent governance, or shall we say, country. And it's right. Patrolled by the Swiss guards, right? The Swiss guards are there, and Switzerland is also tied into the whole papal yoke. But you look at the foundings, the founder of that pagan religion, it's not Simon Peter, the apostle, it's Simon Magus, the same Simon Magus that we read in Acts, came to Peter to buy the priesthood, to buy the healing, to buy this. And Peter rebuked him and said, this is not bought with money, depart. But Simon the sorcerer is what's called in Acts. He actually found himself, after being rebuked by Peter, to the head of the Roman Empire and began to had his black magic sorcery cult operating there in Rome, getting more and more power over the years until 325 AD under Constantine. They had a great influx into Constantine's inner workings, and so that's really what made Constantine adopt the cross, not of Peter, not of the true Lord Jesus Christ, but Simon Magus, Simon the sorcerer, Simon the dark magician, if you will. And then you see where, I tell this. Go ahead.
Well, like I say, there are two sides to the church. The Roman side, right? Mm-hmm. And the actual church that we think of as the Christian church. And the Catholics haven't been any more aware of this than Americans have been aware of what was going on with their government. It's like we've all been asleep.
Well, I got to tell you, when I went back in 2014, spent a good solid 2 weeks in an archaeological expedition in Israel, one of the key tour guides that we had was an Armenian gentleman who had dual Israeli citizenship with Armenia, and his family was deeply involved in the original Armenian Orthodox Church, and he was so great to talk to about the history going back to, I think it was the Justinian founding father that was there. It was the oldest original Christian church the letters, it was called extant letters from Paul, from Peter, from James. They're still in their possession, right? So he is explaining that the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox are all tied into the different apostolic basic Christian tradition. Ortho means the right or right correct, dox meaning religion, the right correct doctrine, basically. So there's the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, the Armenian Orthodox, and they're all the same in their core doctrine. It's the right, basically who Jesus is. The whole gospel of grace is all there's their basic premise and tenets. In talking to him, I got to tell you, Anna, he told much the same basic story that you just explained, that it's the Roman paganism that they have been fighting tooth and nail with assassinations, of wars instigated, all from the time of Constantine, trying to wipe out the Orthodox. It's the Orthodox faith against this paganistic faith, which brings me to my question to you. I want to kind of end with this. I've talked to a lot of researchers as well, and they say that it's not so much the so-called white pope that really runs things behind the scenes, but what's called the black pope, or the Jesuitical organization, the Jesuit pope. What's your thoughts about that? Is the black pope, is that really the real power behind this that's dark, tying this into the mafia organizations of murder and drugs, and let's face it, really pornography and prostitution? What is that? Is the black pope real? What is that about?
What you're talking about now is the church militant, which is an oxymoron as far as I'm concerned, in terms of going out and killing people and assassinating people and fomenting political insurrections and all that sort of stuff. And for the most part, Jesuits don't do that. Jesuits, it's the same bifurcation that you see in the church itself. The Jesuit order was founded by Ignatius Loyola, who was a soldier. Okay? So he came at this from a militarist standpoint, that the church needed soldiers to protect it and to, protect the Pope and to, carry the banner for the faith, right? And this all grows out of course, the entire series of things that happened in the Middle East, the Crusades. Okay, so he's coming at it from that end. So he forms this religious order, and basically the order itself was formed to be a protective order at the use of the Pope. They take their oath to obey the Pope. Whatever the Pope tells them to do, they go and do it, no questions asked. So if the Pope tells them to go kill somebody, they do it. And if the Pope tells them to, take some outrageous oath, you may have seen the old Jesuit oath that was forced on them during the anti-Reformation period. These are the quote-unquote crusaders, soldiers of Christ, blah, blah, that uniquely serve the Pope. So if you have a good Pope, you have a good Jesuit order. And that Jesuit order goes and does wonderful things. They build schools, they help the needy, they administer hospitals for the poor, they build public libraries. They're everywhere. you can hardly go anywhere without you finding a Jesuit somewhere in the bottom of the action, if there's any kind of public good work, okay? But there's this other side to it. And it's that other side to it that you worry about, because they give up their conscience to the Pope. They take an oath to obey him. And any time that you have any kind of an oath or binding like that, where you give up your judgment and your conscience to somebody else, there's a danger involved. And for that reason, there are elements of the Jesuit order that have been misused. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And until the church reforms itself, it's sort of like standing outside of a club, and criticizing the rules of the club members. They have their rules, and the rest of us are more or less in the position of having to deal with the realities that those rules produce.
I just find it kind of interesting in the history of Mormonism. Joseph Smith, then Brigham Young, they had a very similar structure. They really did. They had their inner core. Joseph Smith had a group of Porter Rockwell was his chief, and my ancestor, my maternal ancestor, Joseph Leland Haywood, was very much a part of this group called the Danites that had special oath of protection, inner circle, that whatever the prophet, or in this case the Pope, the head of the church, ordered, they did it, and it involved, whatever, murder, any dissidents disappeared, the throats cut, etc. It's amazing how the parallels are. In fact, in Nauvoo, Illinois, after Joseph Smith was killed in a gun battle, actually, because he was smuggled in as a prisoner, some guns, there was this movement across into the Spanish territory, controlled. This was not part of the United States, across the Indian territory, right? And then we find in my ancestors' documents that Brigham Young was taking direct orders from the Jesuit General Peter de Smet as to where to settle, how to go into the Great Basin. All of this, I have copies of this in my ancestors' papers and journals. So I'm sitting there, what in the world is Brigham Young doing, marching in lockstep with the Jesuit General Peter de Smet? Well, golly, it all goes back to who controls the power over the sovereignty. It really does tie into it. And now we have the revelation of an inside accountant that $100 billion is in a slush fund that has been used for profiteering, for profit, nothing to do with charitable at all. It should be taxable, but of course it never will be, because it's the same group of individuals. Why should the Vatican tax its own missionaries? Its own assets. They're not going to do it. The Vatican owns and controls it. That's another topic for another show, I'm sure. We're running out of time. Let's give your website out where people can go and get these documents. Just chew on it go back to the county of origin, make these declarations. What website do you want to have people go to follow this out?
Well, where I would like people to go for day-to-day news is my website, which is www.annavonrights.com. And it's Anna Von Reitz is a pen name. It's a shortened version of a family name that I adopted back in the 80s. So it's of Anna Von Reitz, or Anna Von Reitz, I should say, .com. And that's where you'll see the updates and news, because we are